Hey everyone, welcome back to another episode of Hong Kong Horror. Simon here. So tonight, we're going to be doing something a little different. For our first story, I'm going to cover a well-known famous Chinese ghost story that I think many of you probably haven't heard of before. I won't be doing my usual breakdown for this one, but I will for our second story. For the second story, we have a really touching and powerful story to share. It's an experience sent in by a viewer, Ellie. It's a story that happened to her mother, Rosa, many years ago. I reworked Rosa's experience into a full narrative. So, let's turn down the lights, get comfortable, and let's dive right into our first story for tonight. A long time ago, during the late imperial period in China, there was an extremely poor but kind-hearted scholar. Let's call him Ning. Ning had left his hometown and was traveling across the country to take the imperial examinations. Are you familiar with what these exams were? Back in those days, these exams were one of the most important systems in traditional Chinese society. They were designed to select government officials. Instead of only giving powerful positions to nobles or people from wealthy families, the emperor wanted officials to be chosen based on education and merit. So men from all over the empire spent years, sometimes decades, studying for a series of extremely difficult exams. The process had several stages. First came the local exams. If you passed those, you could move on to the provincial exams. After that came the metropolitan exams, held in the capital. And finally, the palace exam. The palace exam was the final stage, personally overseen by the emperor himself. But as you can imagine, only a tiny percentage of candidates ever make it that far. Out of hundreds of thousands of hopeful scholars, only a few hundred would ever reach the palace exam. Pretty interesting system, right? Honestly, passing one of these exams could completely change a person's life. It was the ultimate social ladder. If you succeeded, you could go from being a poor nobody to holding an incredibly powerful government position almost overnight. It's kind of like a college basketball player suddenly making it to the NBA. Your entire life changes in an instant. Because of that, many scholars spend their entire lives studying to pass this exam. Like many scholars at the time, Ning had very little money. Whenever he traveled long distances to attend these exams, he often survived by staying in abandoned temples or the cheapest inns he could find. Sometimes, he would just sleep outside. Most of the time, he traveled with nothing more than the clothes on his back, a small bundle of books, and a little bit of money. One evening, as dusk slowly settled over the countryside, Ning arrived at an old crumbling temple deep in the wilderness. He was already very close to the exam site, but night was falling quickly, and continuing to travel through the countryside after dark could be dangerous. So Ning decided he would spend the night inside the temple. The locals in the nearby village had actually warned him not to stay there. According to them, strange things happened at that temple after nightfall. But Ning was completely broke. It's not like he could afford a hotel. So in his mind, he really only had two choices. Either sleep inside the temple, or spend the night outside in the open. And honestly, he would much rather have a roof over his head. Ning was known for being an honest and fearless man. As far as he was concerned, he was far more worried about running into wild animals or robbers out in the countryside than he was about the supernatural. So, without giving it too much more thought, the young scholar stepped inside the abandoned temple, completely unaware that this decision would change the course of his life forever. He set his precious books down against the crumbling wall. The building had clearly been abandoned for years. The wooden beams were warped, parts of the roof had collapsed, and the whole place smelled of dust and dampness. From his bag, Ning pulled out a small oil lamp and lit it. Honestly, the lamp was a piece of crap. It was super dim, but in the dark, it was better than nothing. As the weak light spread through the room, he quickly realized something. He wasn't alone. There was another traveler, already inside the temple, also taking shelter for the night. The man didn't look like another scholar at all, though. He had a rough, weathered appearance and carried himself more like a warrior or some kind of fighter. Despite his rough, intimidating look, he turned out to be pretty friendly. The man introduced himself as Yan. He was a big guy with a bushy beard. The two travelers chatted for a while, both relieved to have some company for the night. After all, staying in an abandoned temple in the middle of nowhere could feel a lot less scary when you know you're not alone. After hanging out for a bit, eventually, the two men decided to turn in for the night and went to sleep in separate rooms within the temple. Yan took the room on the left, while Ning took the room on the right. For a while, everything was quiet. But late that night, as the wind rustled through the broken roof tiles above him, Ning suddenly heard something. Soft footsteps. They were coming from just outside his room. Ning sat up slightly, listening carefully. Someone was walking around the temple. Was it Yan? A moment later, he saw a figure appear in the doorway to his room. It wasn't Yan. It was a young woman. She stepped inside slowly, moving quietly through the dim light of the oil lamp. Her sudden appearance caught Ning completely off guard. What in the world was a random woman doing in a place like this, in the middle of the night? But the moment he saw her face, Ning was stunned. She was unbelievably beautiful. In fact, she was more beautiful than any woman he's ever seen in his life. And strangely, instead of feeling frightened by her appearance, Ning found himself completely captivated. Her skin was pale like the moon, and her eyes carried a strange mixture of gentleness and sadness. The young woman slowly approached Ning, smiling softly. She introduced herself as Lily. Her voice was calm and polite, and as they spoke, she even began to flirt with him a little bit. Lily explained that she had been traveling home to see her parents, but night had fallen and she had nowhere safe to stay. Seeing an abandoned temple, she thought she could spend the night here until morning. Ning listened and nodded. He understood since he was here for the same reason. A beautiful woman wandering outside all by herself this late at night would be pretty dangerous, so he agreed that staying inside the temple until dawn would be a much smarter move. He told her that he was only staying there for the night. He had an important exam the next morning. After talking for a bit, Ning told Lily that he needed to get some sleep. The exam he had traveled so far for would take place the next day, so he laid back down on the ground, hoping to get at least a few hours of rest before his big day tomorrow. Lily nodded and also laid down nearby. At first, there was a bit of space between them, but slowly, she began moving closer. Little by little, she scooted closer to him, as if hoping he would wrap his arms around her. But Ning was a very righteous man. Instead of feeling tempted, he actually became uncomfortable. This didn't feel right to him. After a moment, he gently told her that if she continued moving closer, he might have to leave and sleep somewhere else. It simply wouldn't be proper for a young woman to visit a strange man this late at night, let alone sleep this close together. When Lily heard this, she looked genuinely surprised. Most men she encountered would immediately fall for this and would not hesitate to put their hands all over her. But Ning was different. His sincerity and innocence caught her completely off guard, and strangely enough, it touched her. For a moment, the room fell silent. Then, Lily's expression slowly changed. That playful, seductive smile faded from her face, replaced by something much sadder. Finally, she told Ning the truth. Lily revealed that she was not a living person at all. She was actually a ghost. Hearing this, Ning was shocked. Yes, but strangely, he didn't feel any fear. What he felt was something else entirely. Pity. He felt pity for her. For the rest of the night, the two of them laid on the ground quietly inside the abandoned temple, talking about their lives and slowly getting to know each other on a much deeper level. Lily then began to tell Ning the truth about what happened to her. She explained that she had once been the daughter of a respectable family, but she had died very young, at just 18 years old. Her remains had been buried near this very temple. Unfortunately, this temple happened to sit within the territory of a malevolent spirit, a minor tree demon known as Lo Lo. Because her grave was within its domain, the demon had taken control of her wandering spirit. It used her beauty as a weapon. Lily explained that the demon forced her to lure unsuspecting travelers to the temple. Whenever a man fell under her charm, she would then pierce his feet and drain his blood, which the demon would then drink. As she spoke, her voice grew quieter. She told Ning that she hated doing these things, but she had no choice. Her soul was trapped. If she refused to obey, the demon would subject her spirit to eternal torture. Ning listened carefully, and you know what? He believed her. He could sense that she was not evil. He started to feel bad for her, even. She was simply a victim, trapped in a terrible situation. Lily then warned him. Because she had failed to seduce him, the demon would likely come to the temple later that night to take his life. But before she left, she revealed one more important piece of information. The other traveler staying in that temple, the man next door, he was not an ordinary traveler at all. He's actually a powerful Taoist swordsman. Lily told Ning that if he wanted to survive the night, he needed to go sleep in Yan's room before the demon arrived. The moment she finished speaking, Ning hurried out of the room and rushed into Yan's quarters. He knocked urgently and woke him up, quickly explaining everything Lily had told him. Ning begged Yan to let him stay in his room for the night. Yan listened silently. He was a rough-looking man, but he seemed to understand the situation immediately. Without much hesitation, he agreed. Yan got up and reached for his travel bag, pulling out a small wooden box. He walked over to the window and calmly placed the box on the windowsill. Then, he simply went back to bed. That night, the tree demon did actually come to the temple. Ning was far too scared to sleep, so he witnessed everything that happened. At some point, deep in the night, a massive shadow moved outside the window. Then, suddenly, a giant monstrous hand reached toward the opening, slowly creeping inside as if trying to climb into the room through the open window. But just as the hand began to enter the temple, something happened. White streaks of light suddenly burst out from the wooden box sitting on the windowsill. The beams shot outward like blades of light and struck the monstrous hand. The moment the light touched it, the creature recoiled violently. It looked as though the light was burning it. Ning could hear a terrible hissing sound from outside the window as the creature shrieked in pain as the demon retreated back into the dark forest it came from. By morning, Ning was still trembling from what he saw. As soon as Yan woke up, Ning rushed to tell him everything he had seen during the night. The giant hand, the strange white light from the wooden box, all of it. But Yan didn't look surprised at all. He simply glanced at the wooden box by the window, then looked back outside toward the forest. Calmly, he warned Ning that although the demon has been wounded, it was still incredibly dangerous. Ning, realizing he owed his life to this mysterious traveler, bowed deeply and thanked him. Yan handed something over to Ning as a parting gift. It was a small fabric bag. He told Ning, "Bring this with you. If the darkness follows you, hang this around your neck, and no demon shall pass. If you ever have to use it, do not open it again after it closes." Ning thanked Yan and put the fabric bag around his neck. Yan packed his belongings, wished Ning luck on his journey and exams. He also looked over to the other room, the one that Ning originally stayed in, as if locking eyes with someone. He nodded, as if saying goodbye to the empty air, and they parted ways. That same morning, before Ning set off, Lily appeared to Ning again at the temple. She was desperate. She told him that the tree demon was furious and that she would be punished for betraying it. She begged him, "The only way I can truly be free is if you take my remains and bury me in a place where the sun shines and the earth is righteous. Please, do not leave me here in this darkness." She told Ning exactly where she was buried. Ning, moved by her tears and her bravery in protecting him, even though she knew she would get herself in trouble with the demon for doing so, promised to do as she asked. He went to the location she showed him, and he started digging with his bare hands until he found something. It was an urn. It was hers, her remains, right by the temple, under a cursed tree. Ning packed her urn into his traveling bags and turned to leave when he saw it again. A dark, monstrous shape appeared in the shadowed forest and loomed right next to the tree. There was no doubt about it. It was the tree demon, Lolo, and he was not going to let Lily walk away that easily. As soon as the shadow appeared, the fabric bag that Yan gave Ning began to react. It looked like it expanded, then pulsated like a living heart, and then, all of a sudden, the mouth of the bag flew open, and a powerful, invisible vortex of wind began to swirl. The shadow let out a horrific shriek as it solidified into a dark mass of dark, tangled roots and rotting flesh. It was horrifying to look at. The demon was sucked into the bag as it tried to fight it. The entire entity was sucked into this bag before it closed back up and returned to its normal size. It felt heavier now around Ning's neck, as if something was now inside of it. Following Yan's instructions, Ning didn't dare open this bag. In fact, he tied the string on it even tighter just in case. The bag started oozing a pitch-black, foul-smelling liquid, as if whatever was inside had been fully dissolved. Ning put the sealed bag into the hole that he dug Lily's remain out of and buried the bag. Ning carried Lily's remains with him for the rest of his journey to the examination hall. She began appearing to him regularly, always after the sun had set, as Ning was making his journey back home after the exam. Her presence was no longer sudden. Instead, it became something he gradually grew used to, almost as if it was part of his routine. He began looking forward to seeing her. During those long nights on the road, Lily would sit with him at night, keeping him company in the quiet stillness. They talked often about his life, her past, and the things she never had the chance to experience while she was alive. Over time, their conversations became more personal, and the distance between them slowly began to fade. Whenever Ning grew too tired and fell asleep, sitting up, Lily would remain by his side. She watched over him through the night, making sure he was safe and no other spirits would approach. There was a quiet sense of comfort in her presence, something steady and reassuring that followed him wherever he went. Somewhere along the way, what began as gratitude slowly deepened into something neither of them had expected. Ning understood what Lily was, and Lily knew she did not belong in this world of the living. Yet those boundaries seemed to matter less with each passing day. The two of them grew closer, until eventually, without either of them realizing when it happened, they had fallen deeply in love. Ning brought Lily back home with him. He never once considered leaving her behind. When he arrived home, Ning searched for a proper place to lay her to rest. Eventually, he chose a quiet, well-kept spot near his family's ancestral graves. It was perfect. It was a peaceful place where she could finally rest undisturbed. With great care, he buried her remains properly, giving her the respect and dignity she deserved. As he completed the burial, a heavy sadness settled over him. He understood what this meant. In traditional belief, once a person's remains are properly buried, their spirit is no longer bound to the human world and can finally move on to the next stage of existence. He knew this was farewell. With tears in his eyes, he offered a quiet prayer for her, wishing that she would find peace and that in the next life she might be given a better fate than the one she had to endure in this life. He lingered there for a while before finally turning to leave, accepting that this was likely the last time he would ever see her. However, in the days that followed, something unexpected began to happen. Lily continued to appear before him, just as she had during his journey. At first, Ning could hardly believe it, but as time passed, it became clear that her presence had not faded at all. She remained by his side, unchanged. Lily didn't stay because she was stuck. She stayed because she didn't want to go. She quietly stayed near him, watching over him. She never harmed him. From that point on, Lily never left his side. Instead of moving on, she chose to remain with him, and in her own quiet way, she became a part of his life with her presence beside him. Ning went on to succeed in the examinations. He passed and eventually secured a position that allowed him to live a stable and comfortable life, something he had once only dreamed of during those long nights of study. But despite everything he achieved, Ning never married. To others, it may have seemed like a lonely life, but to him, that was never the case. In his heart, Lily had already taken that place. As far as he was concerned, she was his wife, and there was never room for anyone else. The years passed, and Ning grew older, his hair gradually turning white, and the lines around his face deepened with time. His body aged, as all living things do. But Lily remained exactly as she had always been, still beautiful and untouched by time, quietly staying by his side through every stage of his life. When he closed his eyes for the last time, there was no fear, no struggle, just a quiet sense of peace. And Lily was right there next to him as he crossed over into her realm. And in that moment, they were finally able to be together without anything separating them. They finally embraced each other for the first time. In some versions of the story, they are taken to different places, following the natural order of life and death. But there are also versions that tell a different ending, one that many people prefer to believe. In this version, their bond was so strong, so unwavering, that even Yimlo Wang, the king of the underworld, could not bear to separate them. Instead of forcing them onto separate paths, he granted them a rare exception. They were allowed to reincarnate together, not as strangers, crossing paths by chance, but into the same place at the same time, given the chance to meet again from the very beginning. In that life, they would grow up together, become childhood sweethearts, living a simple, ordinary life. Ning was not a successful scholar in that life, and they didn't have much, but they had each other. Just two people allowed to love each other from beginning to end. There is a saying that sometimes you meet someone for the first time but feels as though you've known them for a very long time. It's that feeling of connection that can't quite be explained. And maybe, just maybe, it's because you really have known each other before in another time, another life. You just don't remember it anymore. But that connection is still there. Alright, so for this second story, it's an experience sent in by a viewer, Ellie, that her mother, Rosa, experienced. Growing up, Rosa lived in a culture where having certain gifts wasn't always understood or respected, so she kept a lot of her experiences to herself, but she's always been able to see things that others can't. For most of her life, she's had prophetic dreams and seen spirits, but there is one experience from her childhood that truly stands out. As always, please stick around till after the story, as I'm going to break everything down from a Chinese cultural perspective to see if we can figure out exactly what happened here. Alright, let's get into it. This incident happened to Rosa back in the early 1970s. At the time, she was just a young girl starting middle school, living with her grandmother in a large 7-story apartment building in New York City. They lived up on the 5th floor. Back then, apartment buildings were like little communities. All the kids played in the halls, and the neighbors across the hall from Rosa were a really lovely family called the O'Malleys. The father, Henry, was a young firefighter. He was a huge guy, about 6 feet tall. So to Rosa, it made total sense that he fought fires for a living. She's even seen him with this heavy firefighter gear a few times. He lived with his wife Lucy and their 2 young children, Jacob and Mary, who were right around the same age as Rosa. Because they were so close in age, Rosa was always over at their apartment, or Jacob and Mary were over at hers. When it got late, Henry or Lucy would just pop their head across the hall to call the kids home. But one afternoon, everything changed. Rosa was coming home from school a little bit later than usual when she stepped off the elevator on the 5th floor. She ran right into a group of police officers and fire marshals. They were getting into the elevator just as she was getting off. She remembers them looking incredibly sad and uncomfortable. They had just been to the O'Malley's door to deliver the worst news imaginable. Henry had suffered severe injuries on an emergency call that morning, and he didn't make it. As Rosa quietly went back into her own apartment, she could hear the heartbreaking sound of crying coming from behind Lucy's door. For the next few weeks, Rosa, her grandmother, and the rest of the floor did their best to bring them food and comfort the family while they mourned. Eventually, Lucy came over and knocked on their door. She asked if they could help her pack. Without Henry's income, she just couldn't afford that large 5th floor apartment anymore. Luckily, the landlord allowed her to move into a smaller, cheaper unit that had just opened up on the 4th floor, right below them. A few weeks after the O'Malleys moved downstairs, things started getting weird. Rosa began hearing strange sounds. It sounded like heavy footsteps out in the hallway in the middle of the night. The sound would always come and go. She would hear it when she was trying to sleep, or when she got up to grab a glass of water. At first, she brushed it off. It's an old apartment building in New York. It was probably just a neighbor coming home late from a shift. But it didn't stop. It kept happening. One night, Rosa decided to sneak out of bed. She tiptoed her way over to the front door and looked through the peephole to see who was making all that noise. What she saw completely shocked her. Standing right outside in the hallway, with its back to her door, was a massive, shadowy figure. Rosa described it as the shape of a large man, but it didn't look human. It looked like a blurry, smudged charcoal drawing. It was pitch black in the center, but smoky and fuzzy around the edges. Rosa watched as this shadow slowly stepped forward and literally faded right through the solid wood door of the O'Malley's old empty apartment. This kept happening for days. The heavy footsteps, the charcoal shadow pacing the halls. Rosa asked her grandmother if she heard the stomping, but her grandmother never heard a single thing. She just dismissed it as the upstairs neighbors being too loud. Then, a few nights later, the footsteps didn't stop in the hallway. Rosa heard the heavy boots walking inside her own living room. This went on for a few more nights, until Rosa finally worked up the courage to peek outside her bedroom. The living room was completely dark, but standing right there in the center of the living room was the shadowy figure. Only this time, it wasn't a fuzzy black blob anymore. Rosa could make out the face clearly. It was a face she recognized immediately. It was Henry. He was standing there in his heavy firefighter's gear, but he looked completely drained of color, almost like an old black and white photograph. His gear looked torn up, burnt in several places, and there was a faint smoke hovering around him. He was looking around the living room, slowly, totally confused, like he was searching for something he had lost. Now, most people would be absolutely terrified, but Rosa said that she didn't feel scared at all. She just felt an overwhelming sense of sadness and confusion. When Henry noticed Rosa standing there, he stopped. He looked at her and tried to speak, but when he opened his mouth, no words came out. All Rosa could hear was a horrible, raspy coughing sound. Rosa looked right at him and said, "Hi, Mr. O'Malley. Lucy, Jacob, and Mary moved downstairs to the floor below us." Henry stopped. He looked down at the floorboards for a long moment. Then, he slowly looked back up at Rosa and smiled. He turned around, walked toward her front door, and faded right through it. The heavy footsteps stopped completely after that night. A few days later, little Mary told Rosa she had a beautiful dream that her dad came to check on her while she slept. Rosa just smiled. She never told them what she saw, but she knew exactly what happened. Henry had been looking for his family the entire time, and because he used to always find them in Rosa's apartment, he just needed a little help finding his way. What do you think happened here to Rosa? Please pause the video here and let me know your thoughts in the comments below. I wanted to thank the viewer, Ellie, for sharing her mom Rosa's story with us. Alright, so what do I think actually happened here? As always, I invite you all to please keep an open mind as I interpret this story through a traditional Chinese cultural lens. This is a fascinating story because almost every stage of Henry's appearance follows patterns that show up often in Chinese ghost folk belief and Buddhist understandings of death. Rather than a random haunting, this closely resembles the behavior of someone who has died suddenly, hasn't yet accepted his own passing, and remains driven by his strongest earthly attachments. Henry is not a malicious spirit. There was no aggression in any of Rosa's interactions with him. Everything he did pointed toward one single motivation: finding his family. One of the oldest ideas in Chinese ghost lore is that not everyone who passes away realizes it immediately. This is especially true for sudden or unexpected deaths. Henry definitely falls into this category as he perished in the line of duty. His final thoughts were almost certainly focused on surviving the fire and returning home to his family. This powerful final thought is something we call "zapnim" in Cantonese, which means an overwhelming attachment or fixation. It's the strongest emotional thread binding a soul to the human world after death. And for parents, that attachment is nearly always their children. So why did Henry originally show up as a dark shadow? This is an interesting detail because it perfectly matches many Chinese descriptions of recently deceased spirits. Rosa described his first appearance as having no face, a smoky outline, and blurry edges. We describe this as a soul whose linked tight, the spiritual body has not yet stabilized immediately after death. A spirit is sometimes believed to appear indistinct because it hasn't fully separated from the earthly vital force that sustains physical life. Instead of a fully recognizable person, witnesses often see a shadow or smoke with a vague human form. It isn't until later, when the spirit gathers itself, that its identity becomes clear. I also believe Rosa possesses some degree of Yamyongan, or yin-yang eyes, which is the third eye. Early in the story, we learned she has prophetic dreams and occasionally sees spirits. She definitely has a higher perception of the supernatural than most. We believe that spirits can reveal themselves selectively. Two people can stand in the exact same room, yet only one perceives the spirit. This depends on spiritual sensitivity, karmic affinity, and sometimes the spirit's own intention. Another question you might have is, why couldn't Henry speak? Why does he only produce coughing sounds? Good question. This is actually very common in similar stories across Asia. Ghosts often struggle to communicate directly with the living. One explanation is that the connection between Henry's soul and his physical organs of speech have been severed. Without a living body, speech becomes incredibly difficult, so communication shifts to dreams, emotions, or direct impressions. Which fits Henry's situation perfectly, is that he died in a fire, and his appearance reflects his final physical condition. Spirits often manifest carrying the imprint of the circumstances surrounding their death. This is called retaining the seisung, or the appearance of death. It doesn't mean his soul is permanently trapped in pain, but rather, the image he presents to the living reflects his final, most emotional, significant moment. Because he appears in burned gear and coughs instead of speaking, his manifestation is tied to the trauma of the fire. The coughing isn't a literal biological function, it's a spiritual echo. We generally don't imagine spirits vibrating physical vocal cords to make sound. Rosa is perceiving him through the language of his passing. It's an emotional imprint. People who encounter drowned spirits often report hearing dripping water, and those who encounter victims of fires report smelling smoke or hearing strained coughing. Because forming coherent speech requires immense intention and a strong earthly connection, spirits frequently rely on bomong, which means dream visitations, instead. In dreams, communication is effortless because it happens mind to mind. This perfectly explains why Henry eventually visited his daughter, Mary, in a peaceful dream. Ultimately, Henry was just searching for his family. One thing you'll notice in many ghost stories is that spirits rarely act like all-knowing supernatural beings. In fact, they behave very much like the people they were in life. When Henry was alive, there was a daily routine. His children were always playing across the hall in Rosa's apartment. When it was time for dinner, he would walk across the hall, knock on Rosa's door, and call them home. After a sudden death, a person's name or their anchor can be stronger than their awareness of what has actually happened to them. Henry isn't logically deducing, did my family move? Instead, he's operating purely on instinct and memory. The children should be home. This is my home, is most likely what he's thinking. When he enters the old apartment and finds it empty, his confusion doesn't resolve. He simply continues searching, using the same mental map he had while he was alive. Rosa's apartment was a key part of that map. He wasn't wandering randomly. He was retracing his daily path, repeating the cycle night after night. Rosa didn't just suddenly see a change in his behavior. She was simply witnessing another part of his nightly routine inside her home. I also believe Henry recognized Rosa because she was a fixture in his family's daily life. In Chinese culture, there's a concept known as yunfan, often translated as karmic affinity or fateful connection. Because Rosa shared so much of her childhood with Henry's family, they had an established human connection. Spirits are far more likely to appear to people with whom they share this affinity rather than to complete strangers. So, when Rosa tells him Lucy, Jacob, and Mary moved downstairs, it sounds like a simple sentence to us, but to Henry, it answers the one agonizing question that had been trapping him. In that instant, the cycle was broken. His stump name wasn't a desire to haunt the living forever. It was the need to fulfill one last responsibility as a father and a husband. Once he knew where they were, he could go to them one final time. Mary's dream was the peaceful completion of Henry's final journey. Thank you, Hong Kong Horror family, for finishing this episode. And a huge thank you again to Ellie for sharing her mom Rosa's incredible story with us. For sharing her mom Rosa's incredible story with us. Until we speak again next week. Stay safe and good night, everyone.